Welcome back here with us on Urban Debate on Mirror Now. Shifting focus now to the other issue that is brewing in most of the non-BJP ruled states, especially in the southern part of the country. The face-off between the government and the governor in various states. The latest addition to the list of comments is the list of, in fact, the comments made by Telangana Governor Tamilisai Soundararajan. Rift between Telangana Governor Tamilisai Soundararajan and the ruling TRS government came to the fore as the governor expressed concerns over protocol violations, saying it is very challenging to work with Telangana Chief Minister K. Chandrashekar Rao. Soundararajan also said in Telangana, neither collector nor SP accompanied her to the places that she visited. Certain democratically elected chief ministers are trying to become dictatorial. It is very challenging to work with Telangana Chief Minister. However, she later issued a clarification stating that there was no gap and rather it was just difference of opinion. Listen into these comments first before we tell you a similar example from the state of Tamil Nadu.
I'm not telling that our Telangana CM is not friendly, but there is a gap. I didn't want that gap. So let us move friendly. Like Puducherry, we are moving friendly, so let us all. Because Puducherry, when the governor and the chief minister cooperatively making some decisions, it is good for the people. People are getting some good schemes. But even first initially when I met Honorable Chandrashekar Rao, I told about the Ayushman Bharat, he accepted it. So when some good interactions are there, people will be benefited. So I am inviting him. So let us sit, interact and discuss so that we can move forward to help the people. So that gap will definitely affect the people. That is my humble appeal as well as my opinion. Governor cannot accept some of the recommendation of the chief minister, but it's a constitutional responsibility. When the governor performs the constitutional responsibility and duty, it should not be taken as a contradictory measure to the government. So nowadays it is practiced as if the governor is not accepting the recommendation of the government. It is taken as a personal animosity.
In Tamil Nadu, the convoy of Tamil Nadu governor was shown black flags and banners by protesters today. The protesters, allegedly from the ruling DMK party, were also seen throwing black flags on a vehicle that followed the governor's convoy. Tamil Nadu BJP chief K. Annamalai has also alleged that stones were pelted and the security of the governor was compromised. Now, we have seen similar instances from other states like West Bengal, Rajasthan, Kerala and the national capital as well. So is governor versus opposition chief ministers becoming another flashpoint? That's going to be our discussion this evening on Urban Debate on Mirror Now. Dinakar Lanka, leader of the BJP, is joining us on the broadcast. Khaleeq Ur Rehman, leader TRS, is live with us. Arima Sundaram, senior advocate, joining us on the broadcast. And we are also joined by Sanjay Hegde, senior advocate, Supreme Court. Appreciate all of you gentlemen for joining us here on Urban Debate on Mirror Now this evening. Arima Sundaram, let me begin the discussion with you before I go across to the politicians here on the show. First, it was Tamil Nadu, then Telangana. All doesn't seem to be too well between the state governments and the governors in these states. Now, here we are talking about two southern states, and we have also seen similar sort of a story emerging from other non-BJP ruled states. How do you see the situation in the non-BJP ruled states?
I think to comment on this, I just have to go back a bit into what was the constitutional intention of having a governor. Governor, high dignitary, representative of the president in a state, and his functions were more as an elder statesman. His functions were more to advise the government, the state legislative government, to abide by constitutional norms, to make suggestions to them, to otherwise, in every other way, give them any assistance through sage advice and his own recommendations to uphold the constitutional ideals. Over a period of time, about the 70s or so, suddenly the governor became more or less a political appointment. And especially in states where there was an opposition to the government in power in the center, the governor started being a kind of counterfoil to the opposition state ruled government, a state government which was ruling there. So because of this, the office of the governor over a period of time has got more and more politicized. And when it gets politicized, you will find incidents like what we are finding now. Because the governor is now being viewed, rightly or wrongly, is being viewed, unfortunately, as a opposition party which is ruling the center, the opposition party to the state government, which is ruling the center, their representative in the state, and a person who is actually furthering the political interest of the central government, which is not the same party which is ruling the state. This is the feeling, rightly or wrongly. And this is a feeling which has to be combated, because if you look at it constitutionally, a governor has to act on the aid and advice of the ministers of the state legislature. The governor's powers come to a fore when he finds that the constitutional machinery is breaking down. And when he finds that the constitutional machinery which is breaking down, which is a very, very, very stringent test, as has been laid down by the Supreme Court time and again, he can then recommend to the president the dissolution of the House, or he himself can thereafter take proactive measures to ensure that. The other area where a governor's role plays a very important active role is when there is, after an election, a party which is not clearly in majority, when a coalition is required or a minority government has to be formed, or a chief minister sworn in whose party does not have the majority in the House. Equally so, when trust and no trust motions come in, and this is when he steps in to ensure that there is a continuation of a democratically ruled government. And if that is not possible, recommend dissolution of the House, and recommend governor's rule, president's rule. Now, that is actually the political role of a governor when it comes to sheer politics. But like I said, what is happening is that the governor is now seen to not just be an elder statesman advising and recommending on other issues, but is seen to force the government, or when the government acting through the ministers and the chief minister make recommendations, to sit on those recommendations, to therefore not act merely on their advice, but actually, while he cannot refuse to act as per their advice, he can keep sending it back for questions, for clarifications. And then the feeling comes up that he's sitting on these governmental policies or governmental issues which need his consent. Now, that is where I think the whole problem is arising now. And that is why you find that, unfortunately, I say unfortunately because the fault does not lie on one side, it lies on both sides. Unfortunately, state governments now take the governor as an opposition, rather than taking the governor as a statesman, the first citizen of the state, the representative of the president, and showing the kind of respect that they ought to. On the other hand, many of the governors also today are too vociferous in their own views, their political views and otherwise, which gives credence to this fear of the state governments. I think it's high time that both the state governments as well as the governors each reassess what their roles are, how they should play their roles, and perhaps work towards a constitutional, what the Constitution intended, rather than go on this collision course.
And for the people of that particular state, because eventually it is for the people that both are in power to ensure that, their interests are kept in mind. The people's interest should be the priority for both the state government as well as the governor. Now, Mr. Sanjay Hegde, as Mr. Arima Sundaram was making a very interesting point. There is lack of trust for sure, and that's there on both the sides. Now, for example, if we look at these two southern states that we are referring to today, Tamil Nadu as well as Telangana, in Tamil Nadu, the allegations are being made by the DMK government there that the governor is not letting the bill on NEET clear. The governor is not sending it to the president. It's sitting on that particular bill for a very long time. On the other hand, in Telangana, we have seen the governor accusing the state government of denying her the official protocol she deserves. So the allegations are coming from both the sides.
To be friend, philosopher, and guide. But unfortunately, governors today seem to be carrying on the tradition of the British governors under the Government of India Act. You must realize that way back in 1935, when the first Congress governments took oath under the Government of India Act, they had problems with their governors. The governor's office in independent India was, in the first phase, was often misused to dismiss governments, impose president's rule. And as Aryama mentioned, they also played a crucial role when it came to the question of choosing a person who could command the legislature. So selection of a new chief minister. Beyond these two roles, a governor did not really come into play in the earlier phase. But in recent years, governors have started micromanaging administration. They have no business there. Largely, I think it's also a fallout of the situation in Delhi, where the lieutenant governor has more powers than the chief minister. And there has always been a bit of a push and pull out there. What has been taken away from the Delhi experience is that the central government has started using the governor's offices in all states to further its agenda, or to simply not allow the elected government of the day their own agenda. Governors have no business in normal day-to-day administration or in the formulation of policy, nor in the summoning of officials directly. A governor only reigns, he does not rule. Long ago, Justice Krishna Iyer said, not the waters of the Potomac, but it is the Thames that flourishes in the Indian Constitution. What he meant was that we have a cabinet system of government. And in a cabinet system of government, the head of the government, whether it is the Queen in England, whether it's the President of India, or whether it's the governor, can do nothing without cabinet advice. Rather than accepting cabinet advice, governors today are busy advising the cabinet. It has come to a stage where people are wondering, why should this vestigial organ of colonialism be allowed to continue? Because after all, a governor is unelected. And the Constitution made a deliberate choice that we could not have two elected officials at the head of the state. You had an elected chief minister, the chief minister was responsible. The governor could advise, and only in cases of a breakdown of constitutional machinery. Now, many governors are getting overactive. A governor's office was often a retirement home for politicians who were put out to pasture. But nowadays, governors are very active politicians, and they also see a role for themselves in active politics after the demit governorship. This is simply not on. Maybe it is time that it is written in that a governor will be appointed only with the concurrence of the chief minister, the elected chief minister, and possibly the leader of the opposition.
Okay. Khaleeq Ur Rehman, now, this tussle, in fact...
One quick intervention. You are right about the non-BJP governments. And specifically West Bengal, the governor there has gone, though he is a member of the same bar that Aryama and I have practiced in, he has gone to be quite an activist governor. And I do not use the word activist kindly.
Okay. Now, it's an important point you have made, Mr. Sanjay Hegde. Khaleeq Ur Rehman, now we are witnessing this kind of a tussle only emerging in non-BJP ruled states. We know that the governor also has a constitutional responsibility. why see every action of the governor, with this lens that he is acting like the messenger of the ruling BJP? Is this something that we also need to look at? Because we're not seeing these kind of issues really emerging in BJP ruled states. And I'll of course get the BJP spokesperson here to also respond to the fact that why is there this problem in almost all the non-BJP ruled states. But first I want to seek your views, because we just heard Ms. Tamilisai Soundararajan, who also said that she feels that the state government, the Telangana government is denying her the official protocol that she deserves. What about the points that she is making here?
As far the governor's position is concerned, government position is a constitutional position, and as far our government is concerned, our government has always been maintaining a very cordial relationship with the governor. But as the co-panelist said, because there is always a perception, because whenever you have a different government at the center, then when you have a different government in the state, because there is always a perception that because there'll be some kind of opposition between the ruling party in the state and the government. But in some states it may be true, but in some states it may not be. But actually, this is not just happening these days. If you go back to the Congress days also, when Mr. Ramesh Bhandari was the governor of Uttar Pradesh, the then Congress government wanted to dismiss Kalyan Singh's government. So they used the complete power of Ramesh Bhandari. Even in our state, when the Andhra Pradesh was united, Mr. Ramlal was the governor here, and at that time the Congress has used to dismiss the democratically elected government of N.T. Ramarao. And then they have played a very proactive role. So as long as the governors work within the ambit of the constitution, there is absolutely no issue. But the moment the governors become the extra constitutional power, that is where I feel the problems start. So this is where I think the governors also need to be more responsible, and it is more the duty of the governor to see to it that they don't interfere into the administration part of it, or they don't have a Janta Darbar in Raj Bhavan, as we have been seeing in many states. So this is what happens is and the central government also in most of the states, they are using the government as their messengers, just to keep an eye on and also to topple the governments. So which again is not right. So this is where, and
I'll get Dinakar Lanka to respond to that, but specifically on the accusations by the governor.
If you remember, because there was also a demand for abolishing the governor's office, because it was nothing but the retirement form, as my esteemed co-panelist mentioned. So, and because see the statement what our honorable governor has made here, in fact, because there is nothing like that, because we have been extending the complete respect, the complete protocol to our government, to our governor here in Telangana.
Okay. Mr. Dinakar Lanka, now how will you like to respond to the allegations that BJP today is facing? Because the kind of tussle that we are talking about that today exists in the country between some state governments and the governors is in non-BJP ruled states, and BJP ruled states are doing absolutely fine. So is BJP using Raj Bhavans in opposition ruled states for political purposes?
Absolutely, it is incorrect. How many years it happened to make governance by union government under Narendra Modi ji? It is almost 8 years. And TRS also making its governance for 8 years in Telangana. Whether happened these kind of problems for last 7.5 years, why it is happening for last 6 months only? It is a very, very important thing we should be need to address. As far as governor position is concerned, it is a constitutional position, as all of the panelists is telling. But there are the provisions, there are articles in the constitution, most particularly Article 154, 163, 166, and 174. We need to clearly examine what absolute roles and responsibilities, attested functions are there as far as the governor position is concerned. Is very, very important. We need to address those things. Within that line only, we should speak how the governor position exercise their roles and responsibilities. In Telangana, if you have observed that the basic customs, basic traditions of governor protocols, how they had violated. Is there any state government in India so far called the governor's speech in budget session? Can you give example where it happened? And whenever she went to the any kind of tours or visits as a governor, in the capacity as a governor, why didn't this government follow the appropriate protocols? Both government as well as the governor, both are like a tail and head of the same coin. They should play their role according to the system. Within the system, they need to play their role. As far as this year is concerned, if we observe for last 6 months, what is going on in the state of Telangana? If we observe that without any...
But Mr. Dinakar Lanka, dozens of times democratically governments have been brought down by the center undemocratically, with governors acting as co-conspirators, and that is the reason probably today there is fear.
What kind of hard decision has taken by the governor against this government? Can you show me a single example? Can you quote single example?
No, I'm talking about the sentiment that's there in the country, the sentiment that's there within the chief ministers of non-BJP ruled states. That's the larger question I'm asking you today.
Absolutely, that is wrong. I told itself very clearly, 8 years out of 8 years, why these last 6 months, these kind of problems arises only because those opposition parties which are getting aid from Prashant Kishore are starting the blame game against the union government.
Could you unmute yourself, Mr. Dinakar Lanka? We can't hear you, Mr. Dinakar Lanka. Could you unmute yourself? Okay. There's some technical issue out there. We'll try and fix that and go back to Dinakar Lanka in just a bit. But Mr. Arima Sundaram, playing devil's advocate here, what about the issues that have been raised by the governors of these non-BJP ruled states? Why should we ignore those statements and when they question the treatment by the state government? So isn't it also about the perception that has been created that the governors of non-BJP ruled states are not actually working as, somebody who's appointed by the president, but working only for the center as BJP's agent?
Actually, that is the basic problem. That is the basic problem, is that this is how opposition state governments view the governor. The opposition state governments do not view the governor as this impartial person who is going to sit like I almost want to use the expression, sit like a Buddha, a wise Buddha, and advise a person who's going to be a statesman, who's going to be impartial, and is going to deal with every situation in the way that there can be no doubt as to his impartiality. Like I said, the role of a governor comes in when suggesting dissolution because of constitutional breakdown of the constitutional machinery. The role of the governor comes in when there's a no-trust motion, when a government is sort of toppled. The role of a governor comes in when there's a minority and there's no majority government, and then it's a question of choosing the legislator, the chief minister amongst the legislators. Now, that is the political role. Otherwise, it's a role as a statesman. What has happened is two things. One, the state governments, which are in opposition, take it for granted that if the governor is there as nothing more than a person who's representing the ruling party in the state, the ruling central ruling party in the state, and start off viewing him with suspicion. The governor, on the other hand, has to be doubly careful not to give any credence to this suspicion. And the governor has to be very careful in the way he deals with things, in not interfering with areas where he's not called upon to interfere. If he wants to give advice, of course he must give advice. If he has suggestions, of course he should give suggestions. If he wants to see the chief minister to discuss something which is distressing him, for example, it could be education, it could be treatment of COVID, it could be any number of things. Of course he must call the chief minister and discuss it with him. But the point is, you have to have a discussion between two mature individuals who are both looking for the welfare of the state and not playing politics. Now, each one has suspicions over the other. And when you have two people who are always suspicious of each other, that is when you have these problems. Which is why I said it is time that both the state governments as well as the governors sit and reassess their situation, their position. Because the Supreme Court has made it very clear in more than one judgment what is the role of a governor. We don't need any judgments or anything to spell out his role. Equally, we know where the governor's involvement is important. Equally, we do know that a governor is meant to be the first citizen, the statesman of the state. Now, the point is, we have forces acting in two different directions, both suspicious of each other. And that's why you have these problems. So I think it really goes down to that. The constitution is clear, the judgments are clear, everything is clear. But how do you take away this human suspicion and, like you use the word, perception? Now that is what the governor should work at, to ensure that he's seen as an impartial person who can be trusted on every issue. And the state government should also show the governor the respect, value his opinion, and seriously consider his opinion and not just dismiss it as some opinion given by the central government, which is which has a government which is opposed to the state government. Now, like I said, the blame is on both sides.
And for that to happen, I think firstly, yes, you're right. And for that to happen, firstly, we need intention on both the sides, and instead of washing one's dirty linen in public, probably both sides need to sit together, because this is a very, very serious issue, and now it is spreading to all other non-BJP ruled states as well. I appreciate all of you. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us here on Urban Debate on Mirror Now this evening. With this, we will slip into another very, very short break, but there's lots coming